Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I am the owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona, and with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution Physical Therapy and Fitness in Connecticut and Long Island. And today we got a pretty good topic that actually came up in one of the classes that you do with our alma mater, Ithaca College. About retaining patients. So how to keep patients who initially come in and how to keep them as lifelong patients. And then we can also talk a little bit with Brian's fitness background of doing that on the fitness side as well. So we got a great one loaded up for you, Brian.
So I think this is cool. So it was a fun question. I get to do some guest lecturing for clinical administration at Ithaca College, which is where me and Owen went to school. So this was like really fun. And it was a cool thing that hit me at the end. We haven't really talked about this. We talked about marketing. We talked about our story and how we were doing things. One of the things I thought was really cool was they asked me, they go, one of the things we're working on this unit now is how to retain clients. And I think it was kind of a twofold question. It was like retaining clients, and then I think what I would use is also reactivating clients. So we'll talk about some tactical things that I've done in the past, some things that we can talk about. But this is for you if you've ever had a patient that you scheduled a plan of care out for. So say it was 6, 8, 10, 12 visits, and the person didn't actually go all the way through those visits. What the heck happened and what you can do to fix that. So that's what we can talk about today. And I think, Owen, I think about then we can talk about the reactivation was how do you get them to keep coming back for more episodes of care, right? So how do you keep doing that?
And this is this type of stuff that we talk about all the time in our mentorship group. So if you want to take your PT practice to new heights, you can do it with Physio Growth. Our mentorship program helps physical therapists grow their business and boost income. Join us at school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group. And we talk a lot about, I mean, this is one of the topics we talk about. We talk about pretty much everything, but it's a great, we do an offer with $99 for a month. You get Q&A with Brian and I once a week, right? It's a 1 hour Q&A, and you can bring up topics like this. If you look at all of our other podcasts, things like that any clinic owner might know, Brian has scaled his clinic from the back of his car to $2 million. And I have taken clinics like Brian when we've acquired them or built them, and we've taken it up to 5 million, 6 million, and then a successful sale. So we've seen everything.
And what's cool about this topic today that's a little different than some of the other stuff, is the fact that really what's interesting here is we've talked a lot on this podcast about getting new clients, right? Whether it's you're
Mhm.
setting up your own business, whether you're trying to do something on the side, whether you're trying to set something up within the business, right? That you're currently working in that framework. What's cool about this is we're talking about, if you think about a bucket, we're talking about the stuff in the bucket, right? Putting
Mhm.
things in the bucket. Today's episode is how to make sure there's not a hole in the friggin' bucket, right? Because the reality of the problem is you can put as much in, but this is just as important, right? So
Mhm.
this is what in the fitness industry or even in any subscription based model you call churn. And so we'll
Yeah.
chat a little about churn and how that works. We'll also talk a little bit about how like this works in a standpoint of, because it's normal in any business to have a certain amount of churn. The
Mhm.
businesses that do the best have little to no churn, right? So if you can do that, that's the key. And again, it's a two-pronged thing. You don't it's nice to have an amazing bucket that has no holes in it, but that you have no water going in. That's a problem. But
Mhm.
it's also important to acknowledge that there's a hole in the bucket that you can fix the hole in the bucket problem. So
And I think that comes to, we can get into this too, but there's a good kind of saying about value, and that if you're providing excellent value and you have super happy customers, right? And in our case, clients or patients, then you don't have to spend on marketing to keep yourself busy because they'll usually tell two people. Right. And
yep.
maybe that means one or one and a half, but it's such a high quality lead that if you just take care of the retention piece, right? You can, that is a big, over a longer period of time, a great way to help your marketing, right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
big believer, and the line that I've used, it's a great retention line actually that I've used, is if I'm working with patients. So say you're working with a patient and the person's getting a little squirrely, meaning like, all right, you got that patient who is your plan of care is 8 visits, right?
Mhm.
And the person's 4 visits in, and they're like, I don't know if I can afford this, blah blah blah. They're giving you all the excuses midway, right? And by the way, we'll talk about too. We'll make sure we address the how to fix that with PT packages, because that's really nice about that. But basically, say it's like, hey, like I don't know if I want to continue, right?
Yeah.
a great line is like, "Hey, I'm here to take care of you. Talk to me about the issues. The number one thing that I'm looking to do here is to have like take care of you. We do a great job. You feel great, and you tell 10 friends and family about you.
Mhm.
One, shows trust and that you're out there to help them. Two, puts in a very real situation that like, hey, like let's just talk about what the problems are and then go through them. And three, it kind of does create this subtle hint of like, please tell people about me. I want to help more people. So like, you know what I mean? Like that's the whole
So,
idea. So
so I have
yeah,
a question for you.
yeah.
I started a business because I feel I am an awesome therapist. My
Hmm.
patients love me. They tell me every day how much they love me. So it must not be a me problem,
Mm,
right? How do I look and find that hole in my bucket, right? Because
yeah.
the thing that I think I would find a lot in corporate world, right, is you would get a lot of positive feedback. I must not be the problem. I'm awesome. Blah blah blah. Right? Or you just don't see the downside. Right? You don't see the numbers. So, what are some of the signs that you have a hole in the bucket? That
Yeah.
it's something that you need to kind of watch outside of just the water lowering. Right?
This
So,
is
like, what are some of the
yeah.
signs that the water's gonna lower?
This is something I would say in particular. This is why it's so important to track numbers and data, right?
Mm,
Because if you're not tracking this kind of stuff in general, like what I would say, remember this is still a line from Jerry Durham. I loved this line that he said this, and I think I said on the podcast when he was our guest. He literally goes, "How do you sell plan of cares?" I love the way he said that, and he was interviewing it to a PT, right? The
mhm,
reality is he's asking them basically tell me how you make sure that people are there for the start to finish of their plan of care. Talk to me
mhm,
about that, right? And how you sell that. And so the reality is you're going to look at the completion of the plan of cares. That's what you're going to stare at. That's the number. So again, as a solo person like Owen, right? And by the way, here's another good tip. Start installing this now if you're somebody like Owen, right? Even if you're like, hey, I'm not somebody who's going to go to like 4, 5, 6, 10 therapists, whatever, because it's way harder to get everybody on board with like, hey, track all the plan of cares, track all this when you got 20 to 30 therapists. When it's just Owen and to track the leaky bucket problem, Owen can be like, hey, I talked to this person. I believe they're going to need this amount of plan of care, blah, 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 blah. And this is what we're going to see. If you're a much larger organization, I would track average plan of cares for visits and make sure that within your organization. So say you're a big organization listening to this podcast, I would make the national average is around 11. So I would
mhm,
try and be like, hey, make sure you're around 11. Because if you and then track each therapist's plan of cares. So like there is software that can do that. So
mhm,
basically, what we'll track is we'll look month to month and be like, hey, is so and so dropping off at 6 visits? Now, the question you didn't ask, Owen, that I hope that
mhm.
people hearing this podcast, there's probably a PT pounding their podcast and be like, someone's told me about this, Brian. They track my plan of cares, and I get patients better faster than everybody else. No, you don't. You're not as good as you think you are. So number two is just so you're clear. So number
Magic
two,
hands.
exactly. I got these magic hands, and I can get everybody better so quickly. No, you're just discharging people early, you ding dong. And what's happening is you can do more stuff. So the reality is like you can't tell me if 2 times a week because I'm trying to build strength for someone's core or someone's glutes or someone's rotator cuff you're not defying anatomy. So it's going to
Yeah.
take you probably 6 weeks. So two
Well,
times a week for 6 weeks is 12 visits. So again, if
and
we look at the average or an ACL, right, the average
mhm,
should be around 11. So the way there's two
yeah.
different metrics to go back to your original question. One is if I'm a small organization or a solopreneur, I'm looking at completed plan of cares, right? What I've created, right? And cash base are probably a little lower in that scenario.
Mhm.
Two, if I'm a large organization like ours, we're staring at average visit per therapist. That's the way to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of important too to revisit that visits per referral number is what we would call it, or visits per case. And basically, in a big organization like yours, right? And when I was in corporate, it averages out, man. Like it is very
Yeah,
on the nose if you have enough. There's enough ACLs coming in. There's enough, upper trap strains coming in that they will average each other out in the middle.
exactly.
The other thing that is putting my kind of OCS hat on is almost always when somebody's discharged early, unless again, very rare circumstances, there are some where they're strong, they're great, they just need one motor control thing, right? Um, but typically, what that person is they're pain free, but they're not functionally strong.
Exactly.
That is where a lot of this, the lowest plan of care possible. I agree. Do not give 20 visits to someone who should be better in 10 with appropriate strengthening and education. But that is something either me as a solopreneur I have to look at, and I convey that to my patients on the first visit of like, do you want the pain to go away or do you want it to stay away? Right.
Yeah.
And stay away equals this, go away equals that. Right. So I think that's just a clinical hat, right? Where I've talked to a lot of people mentorship wise, and that's typically where the fall off comes.
And I think a lot of that, to Owen's point, a lot of that comes down to not just like education, but like from the get go. Like I think that again, to go back to that Jerry Klein, because that I think on the podcast I was like, oh, I love that line because like because like I know this conversation. And by the way, did not set it up that way, right, Owen? We did not talk about like reviewing that at all. It
The
was such
pre-show was maybe 5 minutes
yeah,
of talking about baseball.
exactly. Exactly. So in essence, with what Jerry said and what I would say about the plan of cares is when you think about like setting it up from the evaluation,
Mhm.
that is your quote unquote sell the plan of care. What you're
Yeah,
saying is, and I'm this is my line that I use. I'm like, hey, there's kind of like three stages of rehab that we got to look at. Like one is getting you pain free, right? And that's something
yep,
we'll definitely do together. Two is that we also want to make sure that we're working on the problem and addressing that problem. And a lot of times those two things go hand to hand. We address the
yeah,
problem, not address the pain. But the third that does take the longest is that we want to keep this from coming back, right?
mhm,
So ultimately, that's the getting stronger, the injury prevention side of this. And so
yeah,
that is a huge piece of what we're doing. And if you think about those three sides of it, it generally should take somewhere in the 8 to 12 visits, right? And
yep,
again, I say 8 to 12 because from a cash pay perspective, like this makes sense. And so
yeah,
you can't speed up. And so I think when you just talked about it, that's something I've learned to establish from the get go. Like, here's how we're
mhm,
going to do this and explain the situation, how it works. And that is super important. That's something I
yeah.
found.
So that's good. So to find out the hole in your bucket, know your numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then use your numbers to start informing your clinical practice, right? And not so much informing like dominating. Obviously, if all you get is upper trap strains in a month, then yeah, they should not all take, 20 visits, right?
Yeah.
But making sure that you prepare the patient for the fact that not only are we trying to fix it in the short term, we're also trying to fix it in the long term. So pre kind of conditioning your patients, I think, will help with retention. Really is knowing that you have an issue as the owner, and then making sure that you're the next day, the next patient you see, putting that into practice and saying, look, this is the expectation that you should have. And sometimes it's harder on the cash pay side. You might have to, but they're also typically more motivated, right? They're seeking you out and paying extra. So you're going to get someone who in 8 visits, they probably can because they're probably doing all your exercises, right?
Yeah.
Whereas maybe 12 visits on an insurance side might be a little bit more realistic. So it still comes with cost, time, money. So making sure you're prepping them for that.
And I should say, like, when I look at certain things, so like, in fact, it's actually funny because I literally just pulled up on my other screen here the analytics, like visits
Mhm.
per discharge, right? For across of three of our clinics. I would also tell you that don't just do 1 month date range. Like, I look at our average to give you an idea, like our
Yeah.
average across the board in September is 10.3 visits in one clinic, 11.6, and then 11.9, right? So like
Not
that's a
bad.
pretty standard, right? So the other thing
Yeah.
you can do is you can create custom, and you can, again, most EMRs will help you with this analytics. And so
Mhm.
you can play around with some of this stuff and show kind of like what, different ranges. So I would also like encourage people, like if I would do in this case like almost a year to date type of thing. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
do a scenario where like I'm trying to look through, like here, if I look from a March 1st to September 30th, that's going to give me a much better data aspect. And
Mhm.
to Owen's point about an ACL, right? Like that, those numbers should actually go up, not down, right? That's what
Yeah.
should happen there.
And
So,
and as the owner, you have to understand your clientele. Like if all you get is ACLs and like lumbar stenosis from Medicare patients, like yeah, your visits per referral is going to be a lot higher,
yeah.
right? Than someone who just gets like, sore office worker patients, right? Um, so yeah, these are the things that we talk about a lot in our mentorship group, with the physio growth mentorship group. It's where you can kind of turn that passion for treating people into profit by knowing your numbers and understanding like, hey, this is great. I'm helping the world, but if I just tweak this a little bit, then
Yeah.
maybe I don't have to be, trying to fill my bucket up, right? Trying to, wondering about that. And that's all we really want to do is we want to make it so that you can do everything you want to do with your patients. You should be doing with your patients and not having that back of the mind stress of, yeah, but my God, I need like 5 new patients this week or I'm not making my mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So that's the expert mentorship to expand your practice and achieve financial freedom. Start today at insert website here because I will definitely screw it up. School.com/physiogrowth mentorship group.
Nice. There you
Look
go.
in the description.
Yeah. So yeah, so I think this is a really good segue into basically talking also about how to think about reactivating patients. So that's really
Oh
important
yeah.
piece too, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about the importance of reactivating patients, so now say, all right, they've gone through the plan of care, they've come for their 8 to 12 visits, whatever it is, right? They come through.
Mhm.
How do I get them to come back in at some point? Or we've all had that patient that has said, "Hey, like I loved working with you, but now I'm going to this other clinic down the road just because my physician told them it." Like, how do you basically get them to fight to come to see you, right? How do you do that? And
Yeah.
so a lot of that, yeah, man, making them a fan is a huge
Mhm.
piece. So, and then what'll happen is they'll tell everybody about you, and then they'll be like, "Whoa, you shouldn't go to that place. You should go to this place," right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of that, I think one of my favorite ways to do it is that's why email marketing I think is so effective because you just
Mhm.
stay in people's minds all the time. And that can be super effective when it comes to building. We've also talked about networking, like being around that community, doing community events is really great. Like
Mhm.
doing runs, doing like that kind of stuff. Like that stuff is
Yeah.
essential.
How many times have you been somewhere and the first thing somebody says when they see you for the first time in 3 months is like, "Oh, hi, my shoulder hurts."
Yeah,
Like you
exactly.
just associate
Exactly.
face with like fixing some ailment, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah, especially if you're big in a community, the CrossFit gyms, for me with like golfers, with anything, right? Pelvic health, whatever, wherever you go with your community, keep showing up because that is going to be reactivating those patients.
agreed. Agreed. I mean, I think any of those things, if you're not doing the things you need to be doing, right? And chatting with different, basically what you need to be doing are different things
Yeah,
that are centered around letting people and reminding people that you're around. Meaning
yeah.
they still feel like even though you've discharged them, they're still connected to you in some capacity. That's what's so important. So, like I said, that's where like the newsletters come in. That's where like
Yeah.
all these, you know what I mean? Like that stuff is so important on that front, right? So
And when you look at like entrepreneurs, right? They either there's a spectrum, right? And it kind of goes from like the marketer that can talk to everybody that has 10 different ideas and this is how we're going to, go to the moon, right? And then you have the
yeah,
other side where they're very on the nose, buttoned up, making sure the trains run on time, but you might not want them in a group of, networking group, right?
yeah.
This is the part that as the leader, you have to be good at both. And honestly, what you're telling me, this screams to me is this is a place where someone who's very good with management will shine. Right.
Yes.
So if you are a solopreneur then and you're not that way, you have to learn how to be that way. Right. So that's what all these tips are for. But even this is someplace too where like someone like Brian, right? If he really excels at the marketing and getting out and meeting people, well, this is something that's a great task to give to your front office, right? Or to make sure that a manager in one of your clinics is well suited for that role, or even if you get high enough where you have a VP of operations or something like that, where you can kind of say, you know, these are the things that will make us money by you checking boxes, making sure emails get sent out, making sure numbers are looked at, making sure I know who I have to have a conversation with. So this is kind of nice. This isn't something where you'll succeed in business if you're just charismatic and an extrovert. Like this is actually one of those parts where the introvert wins,
I,
right?
I totally agree, man. I think that's the other thing about social media content that's so great. Like how many people have looked at a video, for instance, Owen and I actually haven't hung out in person together. What, Owen, in like since your wedding, maybe?
As it's been a while. It's probably
It's
six,
been
seven
it's been
years.
like longer than I think people would like to admit. But
Yeah.
Owen, I feel like I know everything that's going on with Owen, his wife, his family,
Yep.
like in Arizona because of social media, and like
Mhm.
like look no different than what we're doing right now, right? Like with telecommunication, you can feel like you're super connected. It's actually a little sad, Owen. I'm realizing we should hang out more.
I
Anyway,
know. I gotta
right?
fly to Connecticut.
But I tell people all the time, like that's the thing is like when you think about this process, like Like, this is what makes the reason that that goes without us realizing it is because of this technology. So the
Mhm.
reality is leveraging technology in the way like we've talked about Go High Level a lot, right?
Yeah. Go
Social
Ahead Level's a
media,
CRM system.
yeah, social media. So like that's where again, email marketing, like you can do all that stuff on a regular basis. It doesn't always have to be in person. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, most of our entire world has moved across that, right? Like
Mhm.
I had a conversation, one of my VAs, she's in the Philippines. Like we and like instantaneously we had a conversation together
Yeah.
today. So like it's one of those things where the world doesn't have to be in person, and that is a really great thing on reactivation or retention. So it's a
You know
really good form for that.
it's funny, you said about 8 different Facebook business social media buzzwords there, like
I know.
VA, virtual assistant, go high level, like all this stuff.
Exactly.
And honestly, how many times have you heard people be like, "Ah, it doesn't work," or "Nah, I don't know,"
Yeah.
and yeah, Facebook ads don't work or whatever. And this is where I think, again, this stuff works if you know how to run it, right?
Yeah.
And how to do it. And Brian has automated everything in his process because let's be honest, Brian's an extrovert, right?
Yeah.
But he has automated a lot of his like buttoned up, make the trains run on time by leveraging a CRM, right? By leveraging all this stuff. And if you are looking to grow your PT practice, Physio Growth provides the mentorship from people like Brian who've done it before, who've been able to find different ways of making all these buzzwords that work. Maybe they don't. He's been able to make them work. This group will provide you access to that, right? So do not waste time, spend the money, get a good understanding, and you don't have to spend the time, right? So go to our school group at school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group and unlock your practice's potential.
Nice. I love it. And I mean, again, like for those of you guys who are interested, like this stuff that we're doing will help people make money. I talked about that like today. Like honestly, man, I think about it too. Like with clinical administration, it's funny because like, this half of the class was there up front, like paying attention. The other half was like kind of checked out. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is the class that helps you make more money. Like, don't check out. This is the
Yeah.
class. This is the class that like you guys actually should pay attention to because in 10 to 15 years you're going to realize, oh, this was an important class to do.
Yeah.
Right, like
Yeah.
whereas like so I think a lot of people understand like the reps will come on the physical therapy side. It's this stuff that we don't get an education on that we can help people on. So that's
Yeah.
a huge
I
piece
mean,
of all this.
United Healthcare just posted a $6 billion net profit for quarter three, not the year,
Yeah, I
quarter
saw
three.
that.
I can tell you what, the reimbursement rates aren't going up.
They're
You're
not.
not just going to sit there and get more money.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
even even those new grads in that room, they got to understand the stuff. So
we're currently going through with Cigna. We're negotiating with Cigna, and it's not like get us 180 bucks a visit. That's I
yeah,
promise you that it is not
yeah,
that. Yeah.
they're like, we're either going to give you this or less than that.
Not even that,
Yeah,
not even that. It's, "Hey, what about this?" And they say, "No, try again." It's not even a
yeah,
back and forth. It's, "Hey, wanna do
yeah,
this?" "Nope."
no, yeah,
"Submit again." "Alright, how about this?" "Nope." "Try
yeah.
again."
So
That's what this
put on your future glasses, right? And I
Exactly,
think this is why I love what you guys are doing at Evolution is you saw this train coming down the track,
for
right? And
sure.
you guys changed your business model to have at least half of it just
Yeah,
relying on marketing and getting out there in the community. So that's awesome.
yeah.
All right, man. So we're
Alright,
gonna wrap it up for today. All right.
cool.
I will see you later and have a good Thursday.
Thanks, you too, man. Later.
Maybe I'll fly out there, show up on your
There you
door.
go. We'll do that in person, exactly.
There you go. See ya.
See ya.